The Bear Essentials podcast gives older bears a place to gather for real talk regarding topics and issues that they can relate to. Here at The Bear Essentials, we aren't just having conversations. We are looking to provide actionable intelligence through real-life experience and expertise of our guests. Our mission is to build a strong community that elevates and motivates people to go beyond their limiting beliefs by helping them realize that getting older is not an excuse to hibernate on their goals, but a reason to work harder.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I am your host, Charles Wallace. Before we get started today, I'd like to announce that officially my book is available, The Sentinels of Justice, Chronicles of Duncan Wallace. You can get this up on Amazon for your Kindle as an ebook or in paperback. Really appreciate the support, the kind words I've been receiving. Thank you all so much for that. All right, so now let's get down to business. On today's episode, we explore strength beyond battle with Nick Lavery, a Special Forces hero who exemplifies resilience and inspiration, both in combat and as a family man. This episode is a profound journey into how true strength is manifested, not just on the battlefield, but in the challenges and joys of being a father and husband. I'm extremely excited to bring this interview to you all. So without further ado, let's jump right into my interview with Nick Lavery. But first, a word from our sponsor. Wolfinger Consulting, experts who have achieved real results for their clients, including complying efficiently and successfully with overwhelming discovery orders, passing difficult third-party security audits, and deploying bleeding-edge technology platforms to control and preserve corporate information. Let them show you what Wolfinger Consulting can do for you. Be sure to check out their webpage at wolfingerforensics.com. Hey, Nick, how you doing today, man? Thanks for joining. I appreciate it.
I'm doing well, brother. How are you?
Nick, I'm really, really well, man. Doing a lot better now, considering you were able to jump on here today. I feel like it's going to reach a lot of people, help motivate some people. We touched base briefly before you jumped on here, before we start recording. I think a lot of people know of you, maybe know who you are, so I don't want to rehash your whole story. I think there's a lot of podcasts out there that have that. I want to really kind of get into, we'll briefly go into that, but into really who you are now and things you're doing and just how extremely motivational and what you're doing to help people, if that's good with you.
No, it's perfect, man. Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Well, Nick, just at a high level, for those who may not know who you are, could you maybe just give a real high level of who you are and what your story is and what happened to you?
Yeah, absolutely, man. So, my name is Nick Lavery. I'm active duty Green Beret with the United States Army Special Forces, which I've been doing now, coming up on 17 years. It's just wild when you kind of just think of it that way, how fast it goes by and how many just amazing experiences I've had and amazing people I've had a chance to work alongside of. Originally from Boston, Mass, so we can just get that out of the way because I'm sure that would have come out here eventually. People would have assumed as such. And so that's the bulk of my professional life is that of a soldier. Although, however, going on now, coming up on 3 years, I've also entered into the world of an entrepreneur and entrepreneurship. So myself and my team, we run a training and consulting company called Precision Components, which is amazing, a wild ride, and then lastly, but most significantly, husband and father to two young boys.
Yeah, man. So you're one of the people, I think we all have them when I kind of go about my day or I'm feeling maybe that I don't feel like working out or doing something. I will tell you, you're definitely one of the people I look towards and some of the things you're doing and considering what you've been through, and we'll touch on that briefly, but you, along with another gentleman I had on the show last year, Mark Ormrod, British Special Forces, I think it's people like you that really help show people, what, it's not that bad, and we can overcome because there's guys like you and guys like Mark who are out there who are overcoming. So if you wouldn't mind briefly, could you maybe talk about what happened to with your legs and how you're proceeding with that?
Yeah, absolutely, man. So it was really on my third trip into Afghanistan in the fall 2012 that I would be wounded in combat on three separate occasions. First time I took some shrapnel to the back of my shoulder. About 6 or so weeks later, I took an AK-47 round to the face. I know it's an odd thing to hear, so clearly I got very lucky with that one. And then towards the end of our rotation, this was now in March of 2013, maybe had a couple weeks left before we were heading home, was when I was wounded for the third time. This is the result of an insider attack, or as we refer to as a green on blue incident, meaning that a guy that we had been working with turned on us and he opened fire into me and my teammates using a belt-fed PKM machine gun from about 30 feet away. The result of that was 12 U.S. casualties, 3 of which were killed, another 10 or 11 or so Afghan casualties. So this was considered the largest insider attack that we know of. Most of the damage to me was to my right leg. I took anywhere from 4 to 6 rounds, and it ripped my right leg to shreds. So the result of that was an amputation above the knee. And after a year at Walter Reed, and then about 8 months or so back at my unit, going through a med board and working as an instructor, I was allowed to stay on active duty. And then I began my journey to get back onto the detachment, which really was the goal from the very beginning. And after what ended up being about 12 weeks of different assessments and tests that my unit put me through, I mean, they ran me through the ringer. I was given the approval to return back to the ODA. And then it wasn't more than maybe 7 or so weeks later that I was back in Afghanistan with those guys conducting, full spectrum combat operations. And I mean, really between then and now, not a whole lot has really changed. I've deployed to combat and other operations many times. Most of my operational work has been in the Middle East and in Eastern Africa. I made the transition to warrant officer now coming up on 5 years ago almost. And so my cool guy time has come to an end. I made the transition off of the team about a year ago. So now I work as a company operations warrant officer. And what I used to say is I'll continue doing what I do for as long as I can, but I've realized somewhat recently that that's inaccurate, because the truth is, as much as I love what I do, I'll continue to do what I do for as long as I'm an asset to the guys and girls to my left and right.
Yeah, and that's where I kind of wanted to, knowing a bit of your backstory, that's where I kind of really wanted to start to focus today, because I think as we're around the holidays coming in, I think, a lot of times, as happy as it is for a lot of people, there's depression, mental issues that people are going through. And I wanted to really talk to you today about, I'm sure, and I wanted to ask you this, during your recovery, was there any, because Nick, you come across as so super strong, man. What I wanted to find out is during that recovery, was there times where what was the hardest part, and were there dark times that you really had to dig deep in your mind to kind of overcome?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm really sensitive when I answer this, because the short answer is that I really didn't go down a very dark, negative road. And now I say that, but there's an asterisk attached to that, because it was an emotional roller coaster ride.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, minute to minute, sometimes hour to hour, anger and rage and frustration and doubt and discomfort and, all the negative emotions I was having to battle through. But I was able to stay relatively positive during that process. And I attribute most of that to the fact that I had a very clearly defined mission. I had a very clearly defined goal to be working towards. And that was the thing that I would grab onto in those moments of anguish and incredible frustration to pull me out of that place and then get back to work and get back to someplace positive. And, and the reason why I'm sensitive about it is because there is nothing to be ashamed of for those that do struggle and they do find themselves in a really dark place, in the battle with depression or even suicidal ideations. If you go down to the bottom of how low that can get and how dark that can get, there's nothing to be ashamed of. When you come off the back end of a significantly traumatic event, that's expected and it's okay. we do have the responsibility, in my opinion, to deal with that. And then we have to get ourselves into a positive place, but it's nothing to be ashamed of. And the reason why I believe that and how that applies to me is, so the fact that I was able to remain, relatively positive really isn't something I'm proud of. It's not something that I beat my chest about and say, look what I was able to do, because I don't think that there's anything wrong with it being the opposite of that. So yeah, it was absolutely incredibly hard and rife with challenges. And I think you asked kind of what was the hardest part. It's tough to say what the hardest part is or was. What I can tell you is one of the more difficult things that I had to get through almost really quickly for me to be able to start progressing was just the acceptance that no matter how much time I would spend in the weight room or on the track or training my body, I would never be as physically dominant as I was when I had two legs. I had to just accept that as my new operational environment, which was difficult to do because I grew up an athlete. I'm hyper competitive. I grew up doing combatives and playing football, and I was more of the brawn guy than I was the brains guy on the team. And that's what I enjoyed doing. And that's what my team asked of me. So that was deeply rooted in not just what I did, but who I am, right? I'm a physical presence. Like that's how I bring value to my friends and teammates. So swallowing that pill was extremely difficult. But when I was able to eventually do that, which for me happened relatively early, I was still in the hospital, what that did was it unlocked all these other opportunities and options that I had at my disposal, because the true end state wasn't necessarily to be the exact same physical presence that I was prior. The end state was to be the exact same, if not more of an asset to my teammates and to my command and to our mission. And there's a lot of different ways that you can provide value outside of how fast you can run, how much you can deadlift, and how physically imposing you are. So once I was able to shove that pill down and look at it more holistically, it was like, okay, I'm still going to be training hard and getting after it because I do have to be able to do a lot of things physically. But if I invest myself in these other areas that I believed, and it turned out to be true, would increase my overall value.
Man, that's really a deep, great answer. It actually leads me to this question now, because I kind of, in different ways, I understand what you're saying about being mission driven. I tell people sometimes for me, when I lost weight, I lost like 100 pounds, but for me, it was weird. I know when I would fluctuate back and forth, Nick, it was almost like I had to be fat to have a goal to lose it. And it just made me want to keep going up and coming down. It was like I always needed that goal. What now for you, being the asset, what motivates you now to continue to keep moving, as it's, beyond maybe being an asset, is just in life? What continues with for your motivation?
It's a great question. And this is going to sound like I'm breaking your balls. I'm really not,
No.
and I use this quite frequently, and it's a bit ironic, so the term motivation is one that I've got a very interesting relationship with. Because on one hand, it's incredibly powerful. And the way we view motivation in today's world is more so about an increased desire to do something, right? An increase in energy to do something, right? You wake up motivated, you are more ready to do the thing because you feel that. And the irony comes from, because I am thanked and oftentimes labeled as being a motivational speaker or a motivational individual. And that's an incredible honor, right? So don't misunderstand what I'm saying. That's an incredible honor. It's incredible humbling for me. And if and when we can find motivation, regardless of where it comes from, there's value in that. Absolutely, right? Odds are we're going to be operating at a higher intensity and we're going to get a greater ROI, which is awesome. The truth, however, also is there are going to be times when we are wildly unmotivated. And the point behind this is if we only execute when we are motivated to do so, well, you're going to lose. We will lose. We're going to lose the war. You may win some battles here and there, but you're going to lose the war. And you're going to lose to the person or the team or the organization that is willing and executes whether they feel like it or not, whether they're motivated or not, particularly actually the execution when they don't want to because that creates just such more long-term sustainable value. And it's not even so much the value of whatever that task gives you, right? Like the workout that you didn't feel like doing, but you did it anyway. Yeah, there's tremendous value out of what you gained from the workout itself. But I would argue the greater value is having done the workout when you really didn't want to and you did it anyway, because those small wins compound over time. And that is what builds up more of an automated mental toughness of deliberate execution, irrelevant to feelings. And that becomes quite powerful over time. So I didn't mean to go off on a crazy tangent there. It's a great question. But anytime the word motivation comes up, I feel inclined to hit that because we live in this, social media driven world where people are seeking motivation sometimes constantly throughout the day. It's like, hey man, if you can find it, great. If not, go to work anyway. And that's the point. And that's the real value. So it's more so about the discipline to execute than the motivation to execute. But to answer your question, I guess a little more acutely is, so I'm in a new position now at work as a soldier, and I swore, and my wife can attest to this, when I knew my team time was coming to an end, and I had a great run, it was like just over 15 years, I swore that I would be miserable doing any other job I had in the Army for the rest of my career. It was just going to be a grind suck fest, because that's all I really wanted to do. And, in my heart of hearts, if I could do that forever, I probably would. But it's like anything else. It runs its course. It takes its toll on the body, the mind, the family, so you can't do it forever. So the transition time was the right time for me to do it. But I turned out to be wildly wrong. And I realized that within the first week of my current job, that it's wildly fulfilling. And it's an amazing privilege that I have to get to do what I do. So I still have a lot to learn there. I'm in a new leadership role. And when you kind of elevate, if that's the right term, at echelon, while you lose some intimacy with the guys on the ground in that true tactical arena, your sphere of influence broadens. So it may become a little more shallow, but it opens up wider. And that's an incredible responsibility. And it's an awesome responsibility. So I have a lot to still learn about leadership and influence and being a mentor and providing guidance now at a level where was once, maybe 10 other guys on an ODA. And now, I've got over 100. So I have a lot to learn. So I am driven because of what my obligations are in my professional life as a soldier. In my other professional life as an entrepreneur, there's just an incredible amount that I have to figure out and get wrong daily, but it's also something that I love being able to do. And I think that that's like the key ingredient, man. And I'll close here, where when you truly love the process of it, whatever the thing is, that becomes a huge drive to continue to learn and grow and make the mistakes and, accept the failure and extract the wisdom from the failure and keep on going. So having that passion, whether it's a task or a profession or a skill or a relationship, I think that's a key ingredient that keeps us driving forward.
Man, that when you were talking about that, I was thinking of something that I had a conversation before. I would say to a friend of mine about how we have to be so careful not to always want to outsource our motivation. And it was always that, like, if you're always looking to be motivated by something else and you don't have the discipline internally, you're going to find yourself in trouble. And the way you answered that, it reminded me of that. Nick, so when you said that, I'm curious, because I think people like you in general, very like just hard driven individuals, right? What do you think is the difference between motivation and inspiration? Because I think when folks like us may see someone like you, we go, you know what? I'm inspired by him, but we don't look to you and think that, you're like real, right? We don't look at you like you're inspired by anybody else. Who inspires you?
Well, I mean, really two great questions. I'll answer the first one. The difference, and this is just me paraphrasing and my own interpretation on the difference between motivation and inspiration, is motivation touches somebody's heart and inspiration touches somebody's soul. Either way, the end state is an adaptation in behavior, right? You're affecting behavior. And that's why they're both incredibly valuable. I would just argue that inspiration for me is a little bit deeper. It's a little deeper connection with one's soul. Who inspires me? Man, I gain inspiration daily. In fact, yesterday was Thanksgiving. I was in the gym in the morning, and fortunately, I have a membership at kind of one of these boutique 24-hour type locations. You just let yourself in whenever you want, which is perfect for the holidays. So I'm in the gym. I walk in. There's no one in there. It's like maybe 11 o'clock in the morning on Thanksgiving. So, it's an easy day to take off. Like today's the cheat meal day, right? People are going to lose their minds. And believe me, I ate just like an absolute asshole yesterday. But I was in the gym earlier in the day, and I walk in. There's no one in there. Okay, cool. I'm going through my thing. And there's only one other person that ended up joining me in that gym. And this was a guy who's probably maybe 5'10", 450 pounds. Big dude, right? Big dude. I'd never seen him in that gym before. I don't train there too often. So, okay, he could have been there for a long time. Dude walks in, massively overweight, walks up to the elliptical, gets on that, right? And he's doing his thing, gets off that, gets on the treadmill, starts doing some incline walking. And I was going through my workout like normal, realizing there's just the two of us in this place. And this guy right now has got every single possible excuse for him to not be here right now, whether that's because he's severely overweight, whether that's because it's Thanksgiving. I mean, choose your reason. They're all there, and they're all very convincing. Yet he's in there getting after it. And that just filled me with inspiration right there and then. And the key behind the word inspiration, man, it's attached to emotions. You're creating an emotional effect. The definition of inspiration is you are filling someone with an urge or a feeling that affects behavior. That's what inspiration is. So you're talking about emotions, right? You're talking about emotions. That's why inspiration is so powerful as opposed to, say, persuasion, which is more based on communication. They're both tools, and they're both ones that we wield as teammates, as leaders. Inspiration, in my opinion, is much more powerful. And the way that you truly inspire, as far as I'm concerned, has much more with what you do versus what you say. When you witness somebody in the way that they live or how they're operating in that particular moment, that is what's inspiring. And I was filled with that yesterday, and I'm incredibly grateful because it took my training session up another notch. I'm like, you know what? If this dude's in there getting after it right now like this, let's go. Let's crank up the volume on the tunes a couple notches, and let's dial in a little bit deeper. So that's just an example of one literally just yesterday. Generally speaking, more so, it may sound cliche, but it's my family. My family is the greatest source of inspiration for me, and I'm fortunate to have them, whether I'm physically with them or virtually, every single day. And, I get to look into the eyes of my sons. Oldest is 6, the youngest is 2. And as if I ever needed a more powerful reason or means of inspiration to do something or to be better, they give me that every single day, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the huge about the family, I know even for me, my family, I got to a point, it was interesting, Nick, where I always knew people would say about the why. And it came to me one day, I said, you know what? You're an asshole. Your why has always been there. Your wife, your kids. It really came down to the why not. And I was the why not. I was the idiot. I wouldn't do what I needed to do. It was about being the why not. So I love the segue you just gave me, because you mentioned about your new role. You mentioned mentorship. You mentioned leadership. So for you now, as you start to lead more, mentor more, how do you start to take that inspiration, motivation, what you've learned throughout your career? How do you start to take that now and build your own unique leadership style to help lead others?
This is an outstanding question. I love this, and I'll tell you. And I'm gonna throw out an unpopular opinion here, and I'm in a position where I can do that without fear of backlash. Us in the military, from a civilian perspective, which is a tiny demographic of our society. It's about 0.5% of Americans serve in the United States Armed Forces. Tiny. So it's easy, whether that's just out of a place of respect or appreciation, or I won't say ignorance, but just a lack of understanding, is that it's very easy for civilians to automatically think that every single person that has ever served in uniform is automatically going to be a great leader. And that is just completely and totally inaccurate. You know, the military is like any other organization on the planet. You got some studs, you got high performers, you got shitbags that probably should never have been there, and everything in between. All right. So just because someone served in the military does not automatically make them a great leader. In fact, I would argue that being in the military, because rank is so highly respected and adhered to, I mean, it's rammed into your head from literally the first day you show up, right? This is your rank. This is that person's rank. If that person tells you to do something, as long as it's not illegal or unethical or immoral, you will do it. It's just roger that and you execute. And that's done by design. And it's very, very important that we have that. If you're talking about sending thousands of people across a beach to storm a machine gun bunker, there can be no room for like, I don't really feel like doing that right now. Like that won't work. So I get it. And it's important. But in a lot of ways, it sets up leaders in the military up for failure because it almost de-incentivizes us to want to learn and pursue the true science and art form that leadership is. Because all I need to do is continue to get promoted, and I will be able to tell more and more people what to do, and they're going to go do it. So in a lot of ways, it places this barrier or the ceiling on us. You really have to take it on yourself as an individual to want to learn and grow how to be a more effective leader and how to more effectively influence people around us. I've learned that through the last 17 years. I've had some amazing leaders that I've had conversations with or interactions with, short and long, and been like, wow, that was amazing. And I'm going to extract a lot from what I just got from you. And I want to replicate that or build upon it and turn it into my own. And I've also been around absolute assholes who I'm like, you're horrible at this. And I learned something from you, and it's what I don't want to do. So I appreciate that because a knowledge transaction happened anyway. It was just more so negative. So having lived through that now, you know, coming up on 2 decades here pretty soon, you know, I began to seek outside of just strictly the military for leadership principles and fundamentals and methodologies and tools and tactics to broaden my scope, because I've been a service member for the majority of my adult life. You know, I really haven't operated professionally anywhere else. So this has been the bulk of where I've learned. I took it upon myself really to kind of go outside that. And now, you know, the leadership philosophy and tools and tactics that me and my team teach to our clients, it's a hybrid of military style leadership and tactics and that same essence of work ethic and discipline and structure and how those are valuable. And then layering in more kind of corporate style, styles that come from athletics. So it's been an ongoing process for me just for my own development now for the last probably 5, 6, 7 years. And it's really only been the last couple years that we've actually turned it more into a service for others.
Well, I mean, from what I can see, you guys you're really, I mean, like I said, I enjoy what you put out online and things like that. I learn, and that's exactly why I wanted to have you on. I wanted to ask you this, Nick, because I find for someone like you, a lot of people I'll see online and I gain motivation, inspiration from. And we talked a little bit about, you mentioned even before you mentioned kids, things like that. So when I see Nick Lavery, I see, you know, the soldier, now the leader, but I know there's the husband, there's the father. How much of that is the same and how much of that is different depending on which one you are?
Wow. I mean, to say that I'm the same across all fronts would be inaccurate. You know, the way that I influence and advise and spend time with my wife and my kids in many circumstances is different than the way I do with my teammates at work and with my teammates, with my other professional lifestyle and with our clients and with my friends. So it is different. And that I think is part of being a good leader in general is knowing your audience, knowing your target audience, knowing their strengths, their weaknesses, their current operational environment, what they're dealing with, and being able to make those variable adjustments from person to person or entity to entity. The interesting part of this, and I'll reference who I'll refer to as a mentor of mine, and that is Colonel Hal Moore, who actually retired as, I believe, Brigadier General or Major General. He retired as a Major General Hal Moore. He was a lieutenant colonel during Vietnam. If you've seen the movie We Were Soldiers, starring Mel Gibson, he plays Colonel Moore. Colonel Moore was asked a question. He was a father of five, or I'm sorry, father of five, husband, father of five. And he was asked at one point, how do you balance being a good soldier and a good family man? And I think his answer was just absolutely brilliant. And it was, I'd like to think that being good at the one makes me better at the other. And I'm not sure if I could frame it more concisely or more accurately. I leverage that kind of philosophy pretty much every single day. And the key behind what he says is that it's a two-way road, right? Making me good at the one makes me better at the other. He's not saying which one, because it goes both directions. And I think, for me anyway, taking my character traits and personality traits and what I've learned as a soldier and applying them to my family was relatively easy for me to do. Granted, I had already been a soldier for many, many years before I had these little maniacs in my life. So I already had that foundation. So it's like, okay, I'm going to take the principles and the way I live and operate, and I'm going to apply them to my family. And it was easy for me. It makes sense. Like discipline and, sacrifice and time management and work ethic. These like hard and fast requirements to be a good soldier, and apply them to my life as a father and a husband. Boom. What took me longer to realize, to Hal Moore's point, is it goes the other direction as well. And you think about the character traits, personality traits, the aspects of being a good husband and father. You're not talking about things like patience, compassion, empathy, right? Some of these kind of softer, squishier type emotions and attributes of our life, which oftentimes is hard to take those and apply them into the hard and fast, hard charging lifestyle of a Green Beret. But once I began doing that, I started to see massive gains being made across my team and my ability to influence them. It was, wow, this really is a two-way street. So I agree with Hal. I've been much more deliberate about working that street in both directions, because there's absolutely value to be learned with what you learn and apply as a husband, father, as well as a service member, or regardless of what your profession is.
I love that answer. And I have seen that movie. So I didn't realize the name. I thought it sounded familiar, but I have seen that movie. So I really appreciate that answer. All right, Nick, I want to end with this. So let's just say, sitting here now, 10, 15 years down the line, somebody comes across this podcast and we're talking about legacy, and not as much about just anybody. What do you hope that you say right now that if your kids see this podcast, what do you hope they may have learned from you in these next 10 to 15 years? And how do they look at you and realize the legacy you left and who you are?
That's another great question, dude. You're dropping absolute gems here today, the day after Thanksgiving. You are dropping gems, dude. And I got to preface this, because you mentioned a word that I've had a somewhat recent kind of modification with, and that's the word legacy. And prior to April 17th, 2017, and there's a reason why I know the exact day. Prior to that, my interpretation of legacy was very shallow. It was very egocentrical. It was self-centered, perhaps even arrogant. If you were living in a manner in which people could remember you a certain way, it just didn't sit well with me. I looked at it as almost like a negative way to live, or for a negative reason. And April 17th, that changed for me. And the irony of that date is 3 days before my oldest son was born. And it was on that exact day that I sat down on a computer, I opened up a PowerPoint, and I created this image, this logo, and it was horribly done. I have zero graphic design skill. It was terrible. It was just like an image of something. It's turned into what Precision Components is today, but that was the beginning of it. And it was then that my interpretation of legacy changed, because it really wasn't about, for me anyway, hoping that America would build some monument for me and the random people 100 years from now would be like bowing to it. It has nothing to do with it, but it was about being a father, and it was about introducing kids into this world. And how do you want them to remember you, as per your question? So that shift for me was incredibly important, because it really was the spark that drove, the services and the things that, me and my team do now outwardly, which is amazing. We've impacted the lives of thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people at this point. So a little ignorant on my part, but it took me knowing I was going to be a father for my interpretation of legacy to change. So to answer your question, 15, 20 years from now, my goal is that my kids, when they think of me, and hopefully I'm still alive at the time, that I lived what I practiced what I preached. I lived what I said. And, I was asked a question at a conference and I didn't have an answer for it at the time. And this was years ago. And it was, hey, Nick, you're still on the teams and now you're a family man. Like, at what point do you do something that requires a little less risk to your life for the sake of them? And I was like, man, that's a great question. And I didn't have a great answer for him. I said, thank you for that question. You just gave me something to think and pray on and analyze, which I did. And, for one, if you removed all of the special operations operators that were husbands and fathers, SOCOM would cease to exist. So there's that. Most of us are family people because we are typically a little older of a crowd. But the second part that really dawned on me was, when I tell my sons, hey man, you can be whatever you want to be in this world. You can do whatever you want to do in this world. I need them to know that I lived that myself. Because at some point, our kids are going to figure us out. When they're 6 years old, they do what you say because you're their dad, and they're starting to absorb how you act, but it's very different. They haven't had the life experience to truly put a lot of this in perspective. Eventually, they will. So if I were to say, hey, man, you can do whatever you want to do in this world. You can be whoever you want to be. I need to be prepared for him to look at me and say, well, is that what you did? And if the answer to that is no, then I've been messing up for quite a bit of time. So I need them to have experienced that what I am telling them, I did myself. And again, we're talking, inspiration versus persuasion. It can't be one of these do as I say, not as I do. I think that is one of the ultimate failures in leadership, parenting, partnership, choose your relationship dynamic. Do as I say, not as I do is an L. That's a loss. You lost if that's the case. Because not only are you somewhat of a hypocrite, but you are impacting people times 10 more by what you do. So at that time, man, my goal, which is part of how I live, is for my kids to look back and say, you know what? My father told me that I could be anything, and he was right. And I witnessed him do that for himself.
Man, Nick, I really appreciate you getting as deep as you have today. Thank you for that. I think that, at least from this spot, what I can see is you're leaving a legacy that your sons will be extremely proud to say that you are their dad. So kudos to you.
Thank you, sir.
That. Last thing I just wanted to ask, and more just, where can people find more about you, see what you're doing, keep up with you, give you a chance to plug some of that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, the easy kind of one-stop shop is our website. It's teammachine.com. Machine is spelled MCHN. It's got links to the socials and to buy the book and merchandise and get a hold of us and, all the things. So that's the place to go if you're interested.
Awesome. I'll make sure to have those links in there. Nick, again, I told you before we started, when I started the podcast, you were a person I wanted to have on the podcast. I personally didn't think I was ready yet. So I'm glad I did wait, because it gave me some more time to reflect and actually see more of what you're doing and come up with, I think, some better questions. And your answers were extremely deep and poignant. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
No, man, thanks for sticking to it. I'm glad we got on the books. This was a great conversation, man, and I got no reason to blow any smoke up your ass. I probably wouldn't tell you sucked on air. I'd just wait till we were done. Like, you got some work to do. Genuinely, I really enjoyed this, brother. So I appreciate the opportunity and your time.
Yeah, Nick, thanks, man. And last thing I want to tell you is I recently just released a book. And
nice.
It's
Congratulations.
It's called The Sentinels of Justice. It's kind of a action hero for kids, to try to give kids heroes to look up to kind of thing. built a little bit after my father, but also some people who I've looked up to and have learned from. And I did want to mention this to you loosely, but there's a character in the book called Blaster. He is a soldier, kind of loosely based off of you and a gentleman, Mark Ormrod. So
I can't wait to read this.
Yeah, man. Listen, it's probably more for teens to young adults, really trying to teach them some influence with Japanese culture, the Bushido code, honor, discipline. And my last name being Wallace, the character is a mix of William Wallace, descendant of William Wallace, and a Japanese samurai, and he's the leader of the group. And Blaster's on his team, and Blaster is loosely off of Nick Lavery and Mark Ormrod. And that's the first time I got to tell anybody this, but I wanted to tell you that as we were on this.
Amazing. Very humbling, man. Humbling, and it's an honor. I look forward to reading it, man. And congratulations on the book. I know how difficult it is. It's quite a milestone. Be proud of that, bro. Regardless of sales, be proud of it, because that's a huge accomplishment.
Well, anyway, man, thank you, Nick. And listen, I hope you get a good workout in. I need to get one in after yesterday also, man. I'll use your term. I ate like an asshole also. So time to get back to it, man. Well, listen, I hope you have a great rest of your day and weekend, man. And thank you so much. And everybody, thanks for listening. Appreciate it.
This has been the Bear Essentials. Thanks for listening. And remember, never hibernate on your goals.